Hey, Ninth and O. This is Devotionables, brief devotions for busy people. My name is Caleb Shaw. I serve as a deacon here at Ninth and O and as the director of the YC3 BFG. We're continuing this morning in Psalm 119. I am covering the stanzas that begin with the 9th, 10th, and 11th letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The theme I think that we're going to see in this section is that our good God sends good affliction in our lives to teach us to depend on His good word. So let's look at the goodness of God first. In Psalm 119, verse 65, the psalmist says, "You have dealt well with your servant, O Lord, according to your word." The Lord has treated the psalmist well. He has no complaints. In verse 68, he says, "You are good and do good. Teach me your statutes." That's as clear as it gets. The Lord's character is good. The psalmist knows from experience that the Lord is good. But it's not just the Lord's character that's good. The Lord is good in all of His ways. The psalmist says that the Lord does good. He's good in all of His actions. The psalmist mentions one of these good actions of the Lord in verse 73. "Your hands have made and fashioned me." The Lord's work of creation is good. I think those of us who have been redeemed by the Lord know that the Lord is good in His character and in His ways, right? We have experienced it. I think we can probably look back at our lives and think of time and time again when the Lord has been good and faithful to us. We can all say, like David did in Psalm 23, "Surely goodness and mercy have followed me all the days of my life." Just take a moment even now to reflect on God's goodness in your life. In my own life, the Lord has been so good. He gave me parents who follow Him and who love me so well. He called me out of the darkness of my sin and into the light of His salvation. He's given me a wife who walks with the Lord and who wants to serve Him. He's given us the joy of having little children running around our home. He's opened doors for me to receive an education. He's given me a job I love. He's given us a church family that we've called home for almost a decade now. I could go on and on and on, and I bet you could too. The Lord has been good to us. But the Lord isn't just good on cloudless, sunny days. The Lord is good to us in our affliction. In fact, the psalmist here in Psalm 119 says that our good God brings good affliction into our lives. In verse 71, he says, "It is good for me that I was afflicted." In verse 78, he says, "The insolent have wronged me with falsehood." And then in verse 85, those same people have dug pitfalls for him. In verse 86, he says, "They persecute me with falsehood." And he cries out to the Lord, "Help me." Now, the psalmist here isn't contradicting what he just said about the Lord being good. He's also not saying that affliction in and of itself is a good thing. No one thinks that the death of a loved one is a good thing. No one thinks that chronic pain or years of fighting a disease is a good thing. No one thinks being laid off is a good thing. The psalmist isn't claiming that any of those bad things are inherently good in and of themselves. The goodness of the affliction isn't in the affliction itself. The goodness of the affliction is in what it is meant to do in the life of someone who walks with the Lord. Affliction is good in the life of a believer because our good God uses it to teach us dependence on His word. The psalmist draws this out beautifully. In verse 65, he says, "Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word." The Lord used affliction in his life to draw him to keep the word. The psalmist is a different man after the affliction that the Lord has put him through. In verse 71, he says, "It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes." He emphasizes that the affliction resulted in an understanding of God's word, of His statutes. In verse 75, he declares that the Lord's rules are righteous and that the Lord was acting faithfully when He afflicted him. Throughout these three stanzas, over and over again, the psalmist talks about his suffering and his affliction, but what he highlights more than anything is the goodness of God's word and how he treasures it and longs to walk in its ways. I think affliction and suffering either does one of two things to people. Hardship either turns us away from God or it drives us to God. When we're faced with difficult days or even seasons of life that are really hard, we can either respond in faith or not. We can either put our Bible away on the top shelf and never open it, or we can turn to the Lord and see his goodness in his word. In those darkest moments, the Lord intends for us to treasure his word. As the psalmist says in verse 72, the law of your mouth is better to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. And I'll end with this. This kind of dependence on God's word in affliction is meant by the Lord to produce change in our lives on the other side of the affliction. Look at verse 67 again. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word. Now look in verses 87 and 88. They have almost made an end of me on earth, but I have not forsaken your precepts. In your steadfast love, give me life, that I may keep the testimonies of your mouth. On the other side of affliction, we are called to walk in a manner worthy of the gospel. We're to walk in the fear of the Lord, obeying his word. So let's be the kind of people who humbly but confidently can say that we keep God's word and we haven't forsaken his precepts. So whether you're watching this today and things are good, or whether you're right now in the middle of a season of affliction like the psalmist, Psalm 119 assures us that we serve a good God who accomplishes good things in us, even through affliction, through his good word. May it be true of us that God's word is more precious to us than much fine silver and gold.